it is yet another beautiful morning that I welcome you all to this channel. My name is Duncan. In this channel, we get educated, we get informed, and we get empowered. We bring conversations that are being had at a very high level, to levels which a common man, me and you, can be able to understand, because these issues are basically issues that affect us, and we need to know. So today, I'm just going to answer a few questions which were raised by my subscribers as a result of a video that I had put up about the bankruptcy situation in Ghana. For those people who are here for the first time, Ghana declared bankruptcy. They admitted that within their exchequer, within their reserves, they are not capable of paying their debt obligations and that they need help. And the IMF came in and is trying to help them through fiscal and monetary policies, which they are straightening. And so out of that video, one of our subscribers asked me several questions. So I want you to just walk with me as we try to answer these questions, which I think are very vital and important to all of us as well. So the question number one that our subscriber asked: is tax the only option for government to generate revenue? Is tax the only option for governments to generate revenue? Yeah. There are four ways in which a government can generate revenue, and this one I think cuts across almost all governments. But tax is the main one. Even in the Bible, for those people who are Christians, it is stated, give to Caesar what belongs to Caesar. There is an amount of money you make in the land you live that belongs to Caesar, and Caesar deserves his own. And so there is no country on earth where you will go and you will not find taxes being charged, because that is how the government of the day manages to run its affairs. Now, so tax is the main avenue through which governments generate income. And that tax figure varies across governments. It varies within jurisdictions. Yeah. Some countries tax even to the level of 60%. Some countries tax to the level of 30%. And some countries even tax to the level of 20%. It just depends on what is the need of the government and how have they structured their administrative structure. Yeah. Now, the other way in which a government generates money is through debt. Like I told you, whenever a government falls short, you can decide to borrow. And this one applies even to us as individuals. When you don't have money and you look left, you look right, there is no income coming in, the first option everyone thinks of is usually to borrow. Yeah. So governments can borrow for survival. They can borrow domestically or they can borrow externally. Sorry. Domestic borrowing is usually done either from the commercial banks. The government can borrow from the commercial banks. The government can even borrow from the central bank of the country. The government is allowed to take an overdraft with the central bank, so they can borrow from the central bank. And the government can access finances through the financial markets, which is actually the most. They access more money from the financial markets than any other source domestically. And then they can also borrow externally. Externally, they can go and borrow through other governments, bilateral, government to government, or they can go and borrow through financial institutions, yeah, through multilateral arrangements. Yeah. The other option is through grants. Grants are, they're just what you, as the name suggests, they're grants. I am giving you this money because I have a course. I am trying to pursue this certain course, and I think your country, this specific area of your country needs support, and I'm willing to give this support based on just our bilateral relationship. So an organization in a certain country can decide to, because of its objectives, because of its mission, to come and sponsor and give the government money to push an agenda that they want to achieve. For example, if there's an organization in the US that has the mission of gender equality, they will come to Kenya and give the government of Kenya money and tell the government of Kenya to direct that money towards that cause, and the government of Kenya will do so. So that one, the government does not have the liberty to misuse or to take to other aspects of expenditure. Yeah, so those are grants, but grants are usually very small component of the government revenue. And then, of course, now we have one more, which is the ministerial appropriations in aid. You have probably gone to a ministry and you pay for a service. For example, the fastest and the easiest one in Kenya is Huduma Center. You go to Huduma Center and you pay 100 bob, you pay 500 shillings, you pay 1,000 bob. The ministry in charge of Huduma Center will generate revenues through those services, those service charges. And those service charges are revenue to the government. But as well, they are not that significant. They are a very small component of the government income. So I hope that answers. Those are the 4 ways in which governments make money. The second question was, how will households deal with debt? Households will deal with debt through analyzing the expenditure and minimizing expenses before looking for another source of income. I think this came out of when I say that even within our homes, we have debt. And when there is too much debt in our households, how do we deal with it? And I think that is why she was answering that within our households, whenever I realize that I am too indebted, I will look at my expenses and cut down on my expenses. So I'm sure the question she's asking is, why can't the government do the same? Now, this is the thing. The government can, of course, do that. The biggest criticism that is going through most African countries and their governments is that their recurrent expenditure is bloated. They are spending too much money to just do the usual, the day-to-day running of the government. They have too many employees. There are so many civil servants who are doing nothing. And every single day they bear that cost. The normal countryman bears that cost. There is so much money that is being directed to pensions and allowances to government employees who are not as productive as the rest of the sectors of the economy. Yeah. So why can't then the government cut down on such things? And this will be my answer. If I am a household, the first thing I will do, of course, is to cut my expenditure, to review my expenses and remove those things I don't think are necessary. But when it comes to the government, it is slightly different. While it is very easy to say that, when you come to the government, the system is so connected such that a president, especially a president who is in his first term, is always looking to be re-elected. In government, politics and economics go hand in hand. You cannot separate the two. Every time a president wants to make an economic decision, political decision is triggered in his mind. So don't always think that a president will look at issues from the same approach that a normal person in a household looks at. Within your household, there is no politics. Within the government, there is politics. So a president is usually looking at how can he get re-elected, and if the re-election will be affected by him touching on something like government expenditure, he will not do that. Now, I wouldn't want to judge the sitting presidents by saying, why will they do that? I think I will say, even if it was you within the same position, and you want to be re-elected, because re-election is usually the first priority for most presidents. No president wants to go for one term. And then you realize that if I'm going to cut on expenses, it means people are going home. I'm going to have to cut my workforce almost by half. And by cutting my workforce almost by half, I am going to interfere with some existing systemic corruption. And when I affect this existing systemic corruption, then I have touched on people who I am relying on to be re-elected. I am not saying that is the right thing. Please note, I am not justifying corruption. I am just saying I'm getting into the mind of a president. And I'm telling you, most presidents within their first term will not touch cutting down expenses. And as a matter of fact, they will even increase it because they want to reward those who have enabled them to get to where they have. And that is why expenses as an option of it should be, ideally a good leader should cut down on the expenses for them to start managing the potential for them to go and borrow or budget deficits. But they will not. And as a result, governments, it is very, very rare for you to find governments that cut down on the expenses. It is very, very rare. Yeah. So while that is the first recommendation, that is not what they will usually do until you get a leader who is out to protect and to serve the people 100%. That will always be very hard. And it is also hard because most presidents know that if push comes to shove, they can always use the iron fist to find other ways of increasing the generation of income through taxes. So they know they still have that option. The third question was, are multinationals taxed? Are expatriates taxed by host countries? Is this an option of generating income to the government? My answer would be multinationals are taxed. Do not overthink the concept of multinationals. Think of Coca-Cola. It's a company. It's a multinational. It operates in Kenya, right? Coca-Cola pays taxes. Okay, I will assume so. They pay taxes. Yeah? So multinationals are already paying taxes. Yeah? The only and the expatriates who are employed by multinationals also pay taxes, and as a matter of fact, they pay taxes the same rate as you and me in the graduated scale. For people who don't know how the graduated scale works, people within the different income levels are taxed differently up to a certain point. So if you are earning between 1 and 24,000 Kenya shillings, you'll be taxed only 10% of your income. If you're earning after the 24,000, the additional 8,333, you will be taxed 25%. After the 8,333, the additional 467,667, you'll be charged 30%. But for any person who earns over 500,000 in Kenya, in my country, you're charged income tax of 35%. And I think that cuts across all expatriates. And as a matter of fact, even non-resident employees, if you don't live in Kenya, but you work for Coca-Cola, and you're working for Coca-Cola that is established in Kenya or is resident in Kenya, you will still pay taxes. The only difference is you are not eligible for something called tax reliefs, yeah, but you'll still pay taxes within the prevailing rates. I hope that is very clear. So that option, there is no much option there because they're already doing it. The next question was, how about creation of a local industry? Will that help in creating revenue? A local industry. I will answer it like this. The government does not create industries. The government only creates a conducive environment for industries to thrive. Industries are created by people, business people, entrepreneurs. Yeah? They are the people who create an industry. The only thing the government needs to do is to enable that environment. So within the existing industries, governments can try and enable that industry and create a conducive environment for that industry to thrive, after which more income can be generated out of it, and of course more taxes. So how does a government create a conducive environment? Yeah, by not overtaxing, of course, just making sure that businesses don't feel the brunt and the pinch of taxes, by of course making sure that the infrastructure is good, yeah, making sure that you create enough hubs that can be able to grow ideas, yeah, by creating sufficient or enough institutions that can build the skill, yeah, just making sure that there is enough institutions that impart skills on the growing population so that people can be able to be creative and push and avail their skills to the market, yeah, and be more productive. So the government can help the increasing the productivity level of a country. And the productivity level of a country is enabled through just making sure that things like electricity, things like skills, things like infrastructure is enabled, and of course by creating a legal environment that is conducive for businesses to grow. Sometimes governments have very strict rules that cannot enable a business to grow. So finding a balance between regulating the industry and of course creating an environment that makes the industry to thrive is the core purpose of the government. And I think that is where the government needs to focus itself. Otherwise, governments don't create industries. If the governments were to focus on creating industries, they will need money. And where will that money come from? The money will have to come from somewhere. And like I've told you, if the government has to get that money somewhere, then it is the taxes. So it means it will have to increase its taxes, which again will affect the people. Yeah. The next question was, what is the role of IMF? How does Ghana borrowing from them help their economy? Now, IMF, I had told you, historically, IMF came up around 1944 after the World War II. IMF, World Bank, and the UN. These are international organizations that were created so that they can steer the economic recovery of the world post the World War II. And IMF was tasked with ensuring economic cooperation, protecting developing economies, and trying to help them through giving them or advising them, giving them financial advisory and economic advisory, but also by providing them an opportunity for them to borrow, to ask for support, financial support in the event that they're struggling. That was the purpose of the IMF. But someone will ask, where does the IMF get its money then? IMF is a membership kind of an institution. All countries that belong to the IMF or are members of the IMF, they remit quotas to the IMF, and based on the quotas that you remit, you have a seat, you have a voting right, and the voting right then will enable you to steer the policies towards a direction that is conducive or favorable to your country. So as a result, IMF is not really a bank, it's not a commercial bank, it's not a place you go and borrow money and repay. It's a place where when a country reaches a point where it hasn't have another option, you go to the IMF. That's why they are called the lender of last resort. It is when your country has now reached the end, that is when you consider IMF. And in the event of Ghana admitted they are not in a position where they can service their loans, what will happen? So if you're not able to service your loans, number one, then it means number one, you will be breaking international laws which you're party to. And when you break international laws that you're party to, there are ramifications, there are implications to that. And that can only but worsen the situation that you're already in. So Ghana had reached a situation where they are not able to pay. So they had to go to the IMF to get the support. So IMF did not come in, or Ghana did not go to IMF as a commercial loan. They went there as a lender of last resort to rescue the situation. Yeah. So the next question was, now how does bankruptcy affect Ghana's plans to build their chocolate processing to empower its economy? How does bankruptcy affect Ghana's plans to build their chocolate processing industry? Ghana is planning to build a chocolate processing industry so that they don't have to be exporting the raw material, which is cocoa, but to then start exporting chocolate, which is the finished product. And the reason why this will be affected is this. A lot of the machinery, a lot of the mechanizations that Ghana need for them to set up that industry, they don't have. That is the same case in a lot of African countries. They have to import a lot of these things. A lot of the mechanizations that we use in our industries in Africa, we import from China, from Japan, from Britain, from the UK, that is, from America and all that. So if you're going to set up an industry and you know very well that they are highly mechanized, you will have to have foreign denominated currencies for you to purchase those equipments. That is just at the basic level. So number one, you have already admitted you don't have foreign denominated currencies sufficient even to repay your debt. Where will you get money for you to be able to purchase or to set up those kind of equipment which you're going to purchase abroad? No one will allow you to pay them in Ghanaian cedis. So you'll have to get money. You'll have to have reserves for foreign currency that can enable you to purchase those kind of equipments. Unless, of course, you borrow again, which when you're in a bankruptcy situation, you cannot be given money. Who will give you money when you have already admitted or you have already declared bankruptcy. So that plan might slow down a bit, but of course, over time, after the economy recovers through the help that they are being given and all that, you can of course reawaken those ambitions again. And the final questions was, what would you recommend apart from taxes for Kenya to avoid the same path as Ghana? Before even I avoid recommending a tax, I'll still recommend tax. Self-sustenance. Taxes are the number one ways in which governments can be sustainable. The only issue is just don't make taxes punitive. Don't overtax a small group of people in a country. Make sure that you have as many people who are generating money in the country as possible giving you money. And that has been the challenge for most African countries. The most overtaxed people are the people who are in the government database as employees. People who have been employed are being overtaxed, but the people who are generating money outside the payee or the government radar, they are not giving the government what it's due. But the government, because it finds it easier to overtax the people who are already in its system, it continues to do that for it to meet its target. So I will still recommend taxes, but just expand the tax base. Make as many people as possible to pay taxes, because the Kenyan economy as it is not yet optimal in terms of paying taxes. Our economy is a 13 trillion Kenya shillings country in GDP. That means our economy can comfortably give the government almost 3.5 trillion to 4 trillion in a year. Why is the government only getting 2? Where is the remaining amount? That is the first question we need to be asking ourselves. Yeah? Number 2, of course, the government can reduce borrowing, but the government cannot reduce borrowing mostly by before it has enough in its pocket. But of course, the one and the most advisable approach is to cut on expenses and to deal with corruption. No president wants to deal with corruption, guys. And I've always said corruption is the mother of all problems that we have as a country and as a continent. So, but it requires very courageous, very brave leaders to deal with it, because most leaders are not. Most leaders, even in Africa right now, you can pick only, I don't even think there's any president in Africa right now who is very genuine about dealing with corruption. There is none. Because corruption is so deep-seated into the economy of most African countries that presidents are afraid. And why are they afraid to touch it? Because it will affect their re-election. Until the day you find a president who is willing to lose the potential of being re-elected, then you cannot fight corruption. But if you fight corruption, if you reduce expenditure and manage it, and then you expand your tax base, then there is no way as a country you will find yourself in a situation where you're going to be in the same situation as Ghana found itself. So the only hope is that one day most or all of these countries will find a leader who is selfless enough to fight the beast. And that beast is corruption. And that beast is unnecessary expenditure. That beast is when you're spending almost 50-60% of what you make to pay recurrent expenditure, out of which 80% is being misused and mishandled. Then there's no way as a president you can tell me you are doing your job. So I will put this conversation to rest. To my subscriber, I know you are watching. I hope you have been answered. Continue consuming this content. I'll continue putting up as much information as I can. I hope you have been impacted. I hope you have been informed, and I hope you have been educated. So please remember to subscribe to this channel. Remember to share, remember to like, remember to comment. Ask me as many questions as you can. I will be very ready and willing to answer.